Well, welcome today to the Maine Career Development Fall Workshop. Let me share my screen here. Okay. Okay, there we go. So I am Holly Smevog. I am a private practice career counselor and fortunate to serve as the president for Maine Career Development Association. And you can't imagine how excited I am to introduce you to the program today on behalf of MCDA and the programming committee and Dr. Day and everyone who's put time into developing this program. So our mission is really to support and develop career services practitioners and also to build a working community. And to that end, I'm really excited to share that we have participants today from many states, including the New England states, Colorado, Minnesota, Idaho, Arizona, North Carolina, Wyoming. And if I missed anyone, please send me a note through the Q&A sometime this morning. So this is really exciting for us. So today's program is about life design for navigating change. And if you're like me, you're very curious about what the post-COVID-19 work world is going to look like. Lots of questions there, and I'm excited to learn about this and practice some techniques for working with our clients based on life design. So I wanted to quickly go over the agenda with you today, so you have an idea of what the format is, when you might get a break, and so on. There's sort of two technical parts of the presentation. The morning is a webinar format where you've probably noticed your video and chat are not enabled, and that will change in the afternoon. So the morning is a webinar where we're getting some presentations and some discussions with the moderators, and in the afternoon we'll open it up to a video conference with breakout rooms. So at 8:45, Dr. Day will be giving his keynote presentation, and at 9:25 we'll have a 5-minute break. Then at the same link, we will begin a fireside chat moderated by Rebecca Fraser-Thill and Dr. Day. And Dr. Day will get a proper introduction in just a moment, but for Rebecca, I just wanted to let you know that Rebecca comes to us from Bates College, where she has been a psychology professor since 2003, where she helped to design and lead the early versions of purposeful work. So Rebecca teaches a class for juniors and seniors under the Purposeful Work program called Life Architecture that relies heavily on design thinking. So in addition, Rebecca is a career coach certified in the Pivot method for career change and a senior contributor to Forbes, where she covers the creation of meaning and purpose in work. So you can see a lot of the overlap there with Dr. Day. This is going to be really exciting. And her perspective has also been shared in many publications, including Business Insider, Bloomberg Businessweek, the Chicago Tribune, the New York Post, Dow Jones Market Watch, and other channels. So Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your expertise and time with us. So after the fireside chat, we'll take a 15-minute break, and that's where you will log into the second link that you received in your confirmation. And that's the interactive portion of the program. So from 10:30 to 11:15, Dr. Day will introduce Design Concept 1, and then you will get into your breakout groups and collaborate until 11:15 for some debriefing. And 11:25 to 12:10, similarly, Design Concept 2. At 12:10, coming back together again and debriefing until 12:25, when we hope to wrap it up around 12:30. You can see we're trying to balance the limitations of, working on Zoom and also effectively learning and practicing today. So a few housekeeping things, and then I'll turn it over. Please use the Q&A feature in the bottom of your screen if you have questions, and the co-chairs will be continually monitoring the Q&A. We're disenabling the video and chat to protect our bandwidth. during the initial presentations. We are recording this session in case you need to step out and want to access the content later. So participation is through the Q&A for the beginning, and then later the chat and the video will be open. And finally, there are 4 CEUs associated with this program today, and we will be sending a survey link in the chat at the end of the program, and also sending you an email. So please try to, even if you're not looking for CEUs, we love your feedback. So please try to return the survey to us sometime between now and next Friday, and your certificate will follow. So with that, without any further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Donna Gasper-Jarvis, and I hope this program meets every expectation that you have for today. Thank you.
Thanks, Holly. Good morning, everybody. My name is Donna Gasper-Jarvis, and I'm an MCDA board member, and I'm on the Fall Workshop Planning Committee. And it's my distinct pleasure and honor to be introducing today's keynote speaker and guest facilitator, Dr. Farouk Day. Dr. Day is a nationally respected thought leader and a visionary in the field of career development, and he was named one of LinkedIn's top 10 voices in education. He currently serves as the Vice Provost for Integrative Learning and Life Design at Johns Hopkins University, where he leads programs and services that bridge curricular and experiential learning with life aspirations for students and alumni across the university schools and divisions. Prior to his work at Johns Hopkins, he served as the Dean of Career and Experiential Learning at Stanford University, where he built and made scalable career and experiential services and created a vision of meaningful work and a networked approach of personalized connections and inclusive communities. Dr. Day is deeply committed to equitable access to life purpose for all students, regardless of background or social capital, using principles of integrative learning and life design. He has held senior leadership and board roles at numerous institutions, professional associations, and nonprofit organizations across the country. And he's been a keynote speaker at many conferences in the US and around the world. Most recently, he's been hosting the wildly popular online vision chats, which some of you may have attended. These are unscripted conversations with visionaries about the future of education, work, and many other topics. He started these vision chats in March, shortly after the shutdown due to the coronavirus, and they've been growing in popularity over the past 8 months with more than 1,000 people tuning in for these online sessions. Last year, when the MCDA Fall Workshop Planning Committee first began brainstorming about possible speakers and who we might want to invite for this year's event, Dr. Day very quickly emerged as the front runner of who we wanted to hear from most. And we're really honored that he accepted our invitation and is here with us today. So I know that if our members and guests could, they would be enthusiastically applauding you, Dr. Day, right now. But with that, I'll turn it over to you and welcome.
I think the most popular sentence of the year is you're on mute, and I think I just did it. So now I got it out of the way. Thank you so much, Donna and Holly and Haley and everyone, Rebecca, for involving me in this workshop. It's an honor to be with you today, and I look forward to spending the half of the day in exploring these themes together and learning together. Today's conversation is going to be about reimagining the future, reimagining ourselves, and reimagining you. And you stands for you the individual, for you the organization, and for you the university, for whatever that is. And in considering imagining the future, I always encourage people to think about blazing new trails rather than just finding trails that have been blazed already. So we have an opportunity today to imagine what hasn't been created together, and I hope that you will join me in this journey by being creative, by being open to new ideas, and by being open to just taking some risks. I want to share with you a little bit about myself so that you know who's speaking with you today. And what I could tell you is I'll start with a language that you all start. I am an INFP. And that means a lot of things, but probably the most important trait that I picked up from that description is that I am a dreamer. I like to dream. I like to think about the future, and that can be traced all the way back to my childhood and growing up in Algeria in North Africa, and having dreams of just sort of conquering the world. And after a couple of years of college, I found myself here in the United States. Learning English and starting a whole new journey. I started in the middle of the country in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then I made the rounds from University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee to Washington State University, all the way down to University of Florida, and then Carnegie Mellon University, then Stanford, and then now most recently Johns Hopkins. It was easier to do this on when I was on my own, but once I started having a family, the picture is here for you also. I think it became a little harder to keep dragging them around the country and the world. But I'm constantly looking for the new horizons, and I share this to share with you that that's my perspective. This is how I look at things, is when I consider our field, our profession, where we have been, where we are, I'm constantly thinking, what is the next step? And that comes with challenges, certainly, but I think there's a lot of rewards in thinking about it this way. So this is a little bit about my personal history, but let's go to the history of our profession and how it all started. We all know, I think, that our work has started with the concept of vocational guidance, really to serve new incoming immigrants to the United States in the early 1900s. This was when the concept of trait and factor theory and the concept of matching people with jobs based on skills and based on abilities really was born. They had an influx of people coming into the country and an influx of jobs that needed laborers, and somebody needed to somehow do that matching, and that's how vocational guidance started. This concept, obviously, because it was effective, was used in higher education as in classrooms by faculty. There were not career centers or career counselors or advisors. The faculty member did everything: the academic advising, the teaching, the oversight of student behavior, all of it. And that's who conducted the vocational guidance at that point. This concept also found was very useful in the early 1920s, when higher education started to move towards teacher education, because of the influx, the high need of teachers due to an early baby boom after World War One. So as you could see, that our career constantly starts to pick up this theme of following what happens, the patterns that happen in the economy and society, and then that's how our profession of career guides and advisors and coaches and counselors changes. You see this manifest itself in the 1940s, when we switched into a placement era in order to place veterans who came back to colleges on the GI Bill, and all of a sudden we couldn't just provide vocational guidance. We needed to place them into jobs, and the economy was ready for it because it was a manufacturing economy. A lot of factories that needed employees and workers, and somebody needed to do that matching again in placement offices on college campuses. This was the birth of, I would say, the early birth of our profession. Is that it started with placement offices in basements of buildings in many colleges, college campuses. And we saw this change again in the 1970s, when the economy shifted from manufacturing to a service-based industry. So all of a sudden, there were a lot more options, and the students showed up to our offices at that point, thinking that they wanted to decide what they want to do. They didn't want to just be placed. So we needed to shift our methodology and our work with them to help them figure out what they wanted to do. This was also the rise of the self-help culture. You know, the lots of books in self-help started to be published at that point, and this was also a time where there was an economic crisis, and there weren't a lot of jobs available. So career counseling also involved helping students or helping people prepare for interviews in order to compete for positions. This shifted again in the 1990s with the dot-com boom and our move towards a networking era. This is where when employers and companies came back to college campuses and with a vengeance, and were throwing bonuses at students, and were trying to build relationships with higher education officers and faculty in order to find talent early. And this is when our field of career counseling and coaching started to switch towards teaching networking, how networking can be an effective method in one's career planning for the future. So as we look at all of these options, I know I started researching all of these paradigm shifts, and wrote an article in the early 2010s, trying to figure out what 2010s were about, and I put out there that career communities was really the new way to do this. Career communities meaning that people will figure out what they want to do and find those opportunities, not alone, but by being in community with people with similar interests and similar types of skills and similar trades. And college campuses all around the country started to pick up on this trend and organizing this way. And outside of college campuses also, you could start to see this in either group therapy formats, etc. So this begs the question of what's next. We are now again at another turning point in society and economy. You could see that each of these paradigm shifts in the past have happened because there was a major economic change that happened, or societal change, or both. And certainly that we are going through one now in 2020 with a shift towards automation with COVID-19 that certainly is having an impact on the world, not just the United States. And all of us are having to react to it. So let's explore this together. I want you to meet Nina. Nina is a real college graduate from years ago who graduated in California. And she struggled at that point to find a job. If you read about Nina's story, what you will find is that she has a similar story to thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds and thousands of students who we work with. They graduate, they have a lot of ambition, they have a lot of excitement for the future, and then their resumes just go into the abyss and rarely receive any type of feedback from employers. If you don't mind, whoever is if you don't mind, whoever is on the call right now, if you can put yourself on mute, that would be really helpful. I'm hearing feedback of typing, and that would help me out with the presentation. Thank you. So Nina struggled with her job search and finally decided to take matters into her own hands. And what she did is she decided to make a list of the top companies that she wanted to work for. And at the top of that list was Airbnb. Airbnb is a company that she knew well because she used it as a customer, and she stayed at Airbnbs all around the country. And she always knew that she would love to work for a company like that. So what she decided to do is create the hashtag Nina for Airbnb, created a website that introduced herself, and just turned her resume into a digital brand, the digital branding method for her own self. I believe the website is still alive today. This was many years ago, but I think you can still see it. So what she does on this website is she introduces herself, who she is. It's exactly what we tell our clients to do. She describes a little bit about her passion for Airbnb and then talks a little bit about what Airbnb, what opportunities Airbnb has. And then she starts to create a proposal for Airbnb. So at that point, she started to look at the opportunities that Airbnb is missing. So for example, she looked at the Middle East region and found that at that point, the Airbnb was non-existent in that region. So she started to highlight what this could mean for Airbnb. And she put all of this publicly on her website, by the way. And then she talked about why this matters for Airbnb and the hospitality in the Middle East region. She talked about where to start. So not only what Airbnb could do, but how to do it, and created an entire proposal on the website for what Airbnb could leverage in this region and how to do it. So she provided the step-by-step process. Potential partnerships that Airbnb could have, the key regional events that are coming up. Of course, at that time, I don't think she knew that we will have coronavirus in 2020, but she was looking into the future and the possibilities for Airbnb. And then she starts to make it personal to herself. Why did I do this? And why she loves Airbnb so much. She gives a little bit of a biography about herself and describes exactly the experiences she's had with Airbnb that made her want to apply for this. She put her entire passion for the company and gave them a value add, a proposal for what they could do. And then she began to describe how she belongs to at Airbnb. She was doing exactly what you and I would tell our clients to do when they are preparing for an interview. But she put it all online under the hashtag Nina for Airbnb. She gave them some options, showing lots of flexibility, marketing, operations, business development. Heck, I'll even fetch coffee. And what happened after that was mind-boggling. Her hashtag and her website went viral. There were hundreds and thousands of retweets and impressions on Twitter. It just was going, it went around. She found herself doing interviews on CNBC and MSNBC and various radio networks and online. Lots of people really resonated with this story. And guess what? She got also interviews with a dozen companies in Silicon Valley, including Airbnb. And many of her interviews were not only with the recruiters or the hiring managers, but also with the CEOs and founders of those companies. So I took interest to that story back then. So I reached out to Nina and asked if she would have coffee with me, and she agreed. So we sat down and had coffee, and I wanted to learn more about what got her to do this. And it was really a point of frustration, but also she decided to leverage everything that she knew how to do and just basically create a whole new path. Why apply for jobs the way we've always applied for jobs? That was her question. So she just decided to do something different. And it just happened to work out. I did ask her if she got the job at Airbnb. It would have been beautiful if she said yes, but that is not what happened. So although she did have a meeting with the founders and CEO, and I think at the end it was mutually decided that this was not going to be a match after all, but she got a number of other offers out of this from other companies that took interest in the way she approached this into her proposals. They saw her, how smart she was, and she landed a great job at another company in Silicon Valley. So this is all to show that we are dealing, especially with the younger generation, with a generation that is really apt to doing things the unconventional way. There is a whole world of Ninas out there, 92 million millennials and growing. They're all very digital savvy with social media, when it's messaging, blogging, texting, and they communicate it differently and make meaning differently. It is the age of the new age of thinking, of doing, of working, and of connecting. But we also know that this generation is in debt. With a growing national average debt for college graduates that is around $25,000 for many. It's a lot more than that. We know that many of them are back in the nest these days, and we know that many of them are underemployed. And working in low skilled service jobs, getting paid $24,000 per year, or in administrative support jobs, and are starting there. Um, and we also know that the college to employment transition hasn't been very easy for many of them. 14% are still seeking opportunities 6 months after graduation, and these numbers are pre-COVID-19. We all know that that has added a lot of challenges. So what we know out of this is that the traditional career development theories that we have used for many years before may no longer work with this type of crowd that is really eager to do things the unconventional way. Triton factor is about matching the person's characteristics and skills with the job specifications. Yet we are in a world where jobs are disappearing before our eyes and new jobs are emerging before our eyes. So it's really hard to really consider this. It is really difficult to consider a Holland type of theory where you're looking at just the person and the type of person they are and trying to find the right match for them. There is a call now for a new type of approach in career development. So what I have been speaking about for the last couple of years is that we might be in an era now where we could say that career planning as a methodology and as a strategy is out. This is no longer an appropriate approach for us to try to work with, to tell clients or to help clients plan out their careers and decide what their vision for the future is and their goals are, and then map that out and then begin to work out the steps. Even if that is the most comfortable strategy for them and for us, we may no longer be in an era where that's appropriate. So instead, what I am suggesting is that we replace the concepts of career goals with the ideas of curiosity and inspiration. So when I meet with new clients, I no longer ask what are you interested in or what do you want to do. I want to ask, what have you been curious about and what have you been inspired by lately? Those are two different questions. What do you want to do with your life and what have you been inspired by lately? Try this out for a week. Ask people, clients, friends, spouses, colleagues, these two questions, and what you will see is a different type of response with a different type of emotion that comes with it. Typically, when you ask someone, what do you want to do with your life or with your future or with that degree, they will fold into a pretzel, a little bit stressed, not unsure how to respond. Versus if you ask them, what have you been curious about? What has inspired you lately? They will immediately think of an event or of something. It could be a book, it could be a conversation, it could be a course, an experience that they've had. And we want to also replace plans with prototypes and experimentations. So I will ask each one of you today, how many of you are living the plans that you thought you had when you were 18 or 19? That's assuming that you're not 18 or 19 today. How many of you are doing that? And what I'm guessing, if we were a real audience seeing one another, is that many of you would say that you're not doing that. So if we know that planning doesn't work for career and life, then why do we continue to have it as a strategy? So instead, we want to encourage people to prototype, to experiment based on areas of curiosity and inspiration. There are two factors that are absolutely necessary. when we think about moving from curiosity and inspiration to prototyping and experimentation. And that's given the individual, the client, the person, the opportunity to have an immersive experience and a transformative connection. In other words, giving an opportunity to try stuff out and to get to know some people who can open doors for them. Mentors and experiences, that's what I'm talking about. So if we can get the individual in that mindset of unleashing and unlocking their curiosity and inspiration and being willing to try stuff out that they are not familiar with and take some risks, and give them the opportunity to show them where they can have those experiences and where they can connect with some mentors, I think you can change a lot of lives. So you can map all of these strategies to this new concept called life design that my colleagues and friends, Bill Burnett and Dave Evans at Stanford, have come up with for the last several years that really used the concept of design thinking. Design thinking is a strategy that is used in product design, in service design, by lots of companies for many years, and it helps them go from nothing to a product that they can go and sell to the world, to the markets. So in this, the question here that Dave and Bill posed was really a smart one, which is, well, what if we treat ourselves as our own product? We are the ultimate product, the startup of you, as Reid Hoffman says in his book. So if we use this, then we can take the client through the entire life design concept, from empathizing and having full understanding of the area of curiosity. So it's beyond just what are you curious about and what have you been inspired by lately, but really spend some time understanding that curiosity and where it comes from and what it means to the world around you, and asking further questions and sending them to gain some experiences and to maybe do some informational interviews in order to really get to know the subject of curiosity, and then coming back and defining both the challenges and the opportunities that are around that. Those are just very simple questions that you can ask to your client. What are the challenges and what are the opportunities around the subject of curiosity? Then moving them quickly to ideation. So spending some time to just really have free flow brainstorming, an ideation session of coming up with as many ideas as possible, as wild as possible, as crazy as possible, to try to to act on that curiosity, to move from curiosity and inspiration to an audacious move. So they'll come up with dozens, hundreds, thousands of ideas on post-it notes. They can thematize them. And then eventually I always have my clients and organizations or people that I work with pick one. I just say, just pick one. You have all these ideas, you can come back to them. Pick the most intriguing one for you and prototype it. Let's build a prototype for it. So the prototype for an individual could be if it's writing a book, it's write a chapter or just a paragraph, or start create that. If it's a business, maybe try that out at a farmer's market. If it's a blog, maybe try that out. So essentially, just put it into existence. Speak it into existence, prototype it, and get really involved in that process. And then once you have a prototype, test it out with people, see what it tastes like. So if your prototype is a bunch of cookies, and then the new recipe, have people taste it to give you feedback. And that feedback process in the testing stage is very informative and can tell you if you need another prototype, if you can keep going and then just make some adjustments, and if people are willing to buy what you're producing now. And you might find yourself creating a whole new business, or a new organization, or writing a book, or composing a symphony, whatever that is. But you can't go through this life design concept without really connecting with people and having some experiences. So for us as counselors and coaches and advisors and guides, we have the responsibility to connect the individual with resources around us that help them get these things, get the connections and get the experiences. This is really important, especially now. because we can't really move into this new world where there is plenty of job displacement that is by automation, with old career development theories that assume that there are jobs out there that we're going to match people with. We are now moving into an era where we encourage people to create their own opportunities, compose their own lives, design their own lives. So it's no longer the search for a passion, it's the construction of passion as you go. And really, that's how it should have been. When you look at what's going on around the world, you can see that with all of these percentages that are on the screen, there are lots of jobs that are disappearing right before our eyes. And these are from reports before COVID-19. So these predictions were for since 2016 and all the way to 2020, predicting that there will be massive job displacement by automation. In the most recent report by the World Economic Forum, it was found that 50% of employees will need reskilling by 2025. The new skills of the future have been published by the World Economic Forum. Also, they are similar to what the skills that we have seen in previous reports: analytical thinking, critical thinking, creativity, etc. But there is a new category that showed up this year, and it's the category of self-management. It's the green circles on your screen. These are active learning and learning strategies, resilience, stretch tolerance, flexibility, but also it's the skill of managing oneself in the workplace. So it's branding, it's content creation, it's it's turning yourself almost into a business. And that's going to be a new and important skill for the future. It is not lost on me not lost on you that COVID-19 has absolutely brought a new curveball to all of us and our places of work and our clients. And we're just starting to scratch the surface on what's happening there. And it's very concerning. So we're starting to look at, for example, the GDP growth worldwide, and we could see that COVID-19 has had a profound impact on the economics of the country and of the world. If you just compare of the retraction of the GDP in the United States and the projections for the future, we are starting to approach levels of World War II, possibly even before that. And we can also look at unemployment insurance weekly claims and how much they have skyrocketed since COVID-19 hit, compared to even the highest peaks of the previous crises in the economic downturn of 2008, of 1982, and prior. So we're seeing unprecedented shifts in the labor markets and in the economy that perhaps we are not all really feeling at the same time, because many of us are still covered at home, and because of this pandemic, and there is a 24-hour news media, and perhaps we're not feeling it as much. But if you're a person who has been laid off or connected to a person who's been laid off, I know that you have felt this, what you're seeing on the screens. I mean, just look at the economic disruption in the retail and the restaurant business alone, and how many are actually experiencing permanent closures, both in restaurants and retails and beauties and spas, beauty shops and spas, and bars, fitness centers. All of these mean people in jobs who no longer have those jobs and are going to come back to you for help. And how are we going to help them to design a new future as they move forward? What we also know is that what we are experiencing today is not anything that we haven't experienced as humans in the past. What is happening today is not because of COVID-19. What is happening today was going to happen anyways. COVID-19 just accelerated this process. We were already in the process of shifting from computer automation to cyber physical systems. And we all have read the reports of the move towards machines and automation and machine learning and robots taking over the world. And those are similar themes to what has been experienced before, from the move from the steam engine industry era to the mass production era, and then to computer automation. There was always a disruption in our society and in the economy that resulted in loss of jobs, but also in gains of jobs. So what we know for sure is that there will be jobs lost, but there will be lots of jobs that will be recovered or created also. So the World Economic Forum predicts that by 2025, we will have 97 million new jobs created, even though we would have lost 85 million jobs. So now the idea is, how do we get our clients to redirect their attention, their energy, their skills, their passions towards new opportunities, and what do they need to do in order to reskill for those new opportunities? And in fact, economic crises tend to be a great opportunity for the birth of new companies and new organizations. Just look at what happened out of the 2008 economic downturn. These are just some of the companies that were born out of that crisis. And we all use many of these apps, whether it's Slack or Venmo or Instagram, WhatsApp, Groupon, Nest, Pinterest, Cloudera, Uber. So you can see that all of these came out of, and you can trace this back to, in the economic downturn, there were always new companies and organizations that were created. So the economic disruption and economic downturn can be an impetus for creativity and for innovation and for entrepreneurship, and that is what you could help your clients with. So when I work with people, I just have them just pay attention to what's happening around us. I just say, spend a week at your home, just pay attention to what's going on. If you have kids, see how they're learning today compared to how they were learning a year ago. And you could see that there is a massive shift towards online learning, which means a massive industry there, lots of capital that's going there into investment. So is this an area that you want to go towards? We're all experiencing remote work, and what I could tell you is that at least 25% of jobs are going to stay remote after this pandemic, because many companies and organizations are realizing that it's more effective and efficient, it's cheaper, and employees prefer it. So that is a whole new industry there that will be created. Notice how many packages you're getting at home today versus a year ago. There is a whole world that's behind us. Have you had telemedicine with your doctor lately? And how does that compare to your doctor appointments in the past? And the same way, you've experienced entertainment, and you used to go to the movies. Now we're all on Netflix, and how we consuming media and phone. So all of this, there's massive industry activity that's happening behind the scenes that's shifting jobs and shifting skills towards a whole new era. Just pay attention to what's happening, and you could start to see that potentially you could play a role in any one of these activities. So my COVID-19 early trends that I am spotting are here. I spotted 10. The first one is that I think the company or the startup that will figure out how to build community will make a lot of money. That is the one thing that most of us are craving today. And Zoom, and it's really hard to do that on Zoom. And the perfect example for us is what's happening today in this conference. I'm sure we're all getting great content in all of the activities we go to online, but the connections, it's hard to get that. It's a little bit weak. Remote work, I think, is up and will continue to be up. Online learning will become more and more normal as teachers get better at it and students get more comfortable with it, and it'll be the preferred mode in the future. We just need to give people enough time to get better at it. Value is going to be measured by outcomes, not rather than input. Value is scaled through content and connections rather than services. So we have to be thinking about that. Connections are democratized over time. Skills are measured and credentialed. 40% of the jobs will disappear, according to many sources, including the World Economic Forum, but lots of jobs will be born that don't exist today. Automation will take over, and higher education is already reaching a tipping point where students are voting with their feet and making different decisions from the decisions in the past. They're going to different colleges. They're accepting admission to certain colleges that they wouldn't have in the past. They're looking at value. They're looking at what is cheaper, and they're looking at time to graduation and efficiency. So if you work in a career center, and I understand that some of you don't, are in private practice, but for those of you who work in career centers, the traditional methodologies don't work either. The traditional setup of a career center is career counseling, some web resources, some career education programming, and some employer relations. And the mistake that many would make in this area is to just slap the word virtual on it and think that we are already dealing with this pandemic. And I'm here to tell you that that is not the way to go, because the way we've measured outcomes with that setup is by seeing how many students engage with our services and resources. And that is really not the ultimate outcome. So I encourage you not to make this mistake. If you get anything, if you work in a career center, you get anything out of today's workshop, is to just go back and huddle up with your team and think about the structure of the future. And the one that I encourage everyone to think about, and that we have done at Johns Hopkins, is to create organizations that are based on content, community, and connections rather than services. So I tell my team, we are a content organization. We are not a services organization. That means we have to move away from transactional services, and we need to start to think of ourselves as a BuzzFeed, as a magazine, if you will. We're putting a lot of content there that is scalable and that is integrated throughout the curricular experience. The idea from content is that we want to inspire people. If there's people engage with our content, whether they are our students or outside of our universities, as a result of that, they know what inspires them, they know where to go, they know what to do, and they know how to do it. We are also have the responsibility to establish community. We can do that in our private practice as well, in order to make sure that the person is not alone in that journey. And then finally, connections are key. It's one thing that you help a person identify what inspires them, but it's another to empower them to turn that into reality. And connections are really important in this world. So what I provide as a tool to my students is the Audacious Moves plan. Is in recognizing that all of us get inspired all the time. All of us are curious all the time, but it is very easy for our curiosity and inspiration to fade away because we are constantly facing interruptions by life events. I get inspired, and on my way to picking up my kids, I forget what I got inspired by. So we have to have a plan, an Audacious Move plan that allows us to take that curiosity and that inspiration and turn it into action, into an audacious move very quickly. And the way to do this is, when you are curious, join a community that aligns with that area of curiosity, and turn that curiosity into inspiration. When you are inspired, join or get engaged in an immersive experience, whether that's an internship or an on-campus job, or do something on your own, engage in research, write a book, start a blog, start a vision chats, as I started myself 8 months ago. And when you are engaged and you're starting to turn that inspiration into action through that prototype in that immersive experience, you are closer now to making that audacious move that scares you a little bit, that involves a certain level of risk. But the key is not to do it alone. You have to have community around you, and that's why I have mentor at the core of this model. So as you are going through this whole cycle, make sure that you are connected with an advisory board of mentors that are provided to you by your community, by your friends, by your colleagues, by your university. And really, that's what's going to get you to pursue your life purpose. That is my conversation with you today. I encourage you to not only apply it with your clients, with your students, with your colleagues, with yourself, but also make it a movement. Start to think about the future and with the language of life design, constructing our own futures rather than just matching ourselves with jobs. I think our clients deserve that, and there's plenty that I've written about, and there are two pieces here that I'll share with you. Life Purpose Reconsidered is a TEDx talk that I gave a couple of years ago that has similar themes, and also co-authored an article, Five Future Directions in University Career Services, that give you a lot more in depth of these tools. It's been my pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to having a thought-provoking conversation with all of you in the next couple of hours.
Great. Thanks so much, Dr. Day, for that informative and inspiring talk. We're going to take about a 5-minute break just to allow people to get a cup of coffee, go to the bathroom, take some time to stretch, and then we'll be coming back and doing a fireside chat with Dr. Day and our moderator, Rebecca Fraser-Till. So we'll see you back here in 5 minutes.
All right, I'm going to bring us back together for the fireside chat. I'll wait for Dr. Day as well and let everyone take a minute to come back. All right. So hello, everyone. I'm Rebecca Fraser-Thill. I really appreciate Holly's kind introduction of me at the beginning, and I loved having this time hearing what Dr. Day had to say. I'm sure we all feel the same. Took so many notes. Thank you so much, Dr. Day, for making the time to be with us today. And so what we're going to do during this fireside chat is spend some time with some questions that came to mind for me, and then look at the Q&A, and I'll moderate some comments from there. So everyone watching, if you have questions, feel free to put them on into the Q&A. And if there's an upvote option, I can't see if there is on my side, but usually there's a little where you can click, I really want to hear the answer to this, vote it on up so that we can go with the questions that people want to hear the answers to the most. So Dr. Day, so much to talk about, and I have to warn everyone that we are both INFPs. So there's two dreamers on this fireside chat, for good or for bad. So I'm going to try to bring our feet on the ground a little bit, and I'd love to chat with you about some of the things that I often hear as pushback around design thinking, and even portions of design thinking that those of us who are the dreamers might not necessarily go straight to. So I've heard you talk a lot about, both in your TEDx talk and today, about audacious moves, taking risks, trying some big things. And many people on this call work with individuals who are not millennials. They might be mid-career or later, feeling more like they just want stability more than anything. And this post-COVID era, there's so much up in the air. So I hear a lot, I don't want to take risks. I don't want to do any audacious moves. How do we use design thinking with people who are thinking in that manner?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And before I start, I want to say that I wish I had taken your life architecture class when I was in college. That looked it up, and it sounds great. And life architecting is exactly what we all need. Audacious moves wouldn't be so audacious if they were easy to do. That's why they are audacious, and I think that's what I try to remind people. And it's a common and a normal reaction. We human beings, of course, would gravitate always towards what's easier, what is more effective, and also what has less risk, what has more of a chance. We don't want to fail, we want to succeed. That is normal, so and as soon as we add the ingredient of risk, we introduce the ingredient of fear. There's fear that comes with that. It's fear of failure. What if it doesn't work out? what if it doesn't work out? So let's talk about that and see what happens. So let's have a little bit of that conversation. And I think for us, we have to recognize that these risks are taller orders for some than others, you know. So for the single parent juggling two jobs, to pay all of the bills, those risks are much higher than another person who might come from a privileged background. I absolutely get that, but that's precisely the person I think I would want to make audacious moves, and then our responsibility is to try to provide the support around them in order to make up for for some of those constraints and those challenges. Um, so I I start by saying audacious moves shouldn't be treated as the thing that only the privileged do, because then if we treat it that way, then it's always going to be the privileged who have who achieve their life dreams, and then everybody else get jobs. So that's one. Two, that puts an additional level of or an additional layer of responsibility on institutions, organizations, practice that works with these with clients. So if I'm an institution of higher education, then my job isn't only to educate, but it also is to make sure that every one of my students has the opportunity to make audacious moves, which means that I have to even out the playing field a little bit, whether it's providing some resources for them to do some internships that are unpaid or things like that, provide resources for connections. If I am a counselor, then my job isn't to only encourage that person to make audacious moves, but also to see how I can help them connect to a network that can provide that level of support. So that's why I think when I take the life design concept, I add to it immersive experiences and consequential connections. Those two words or two terms you will not find in the life design books and theory and the conversations and other slides. I add those on my own because I know that you can't go through life design without a community around you. And that could be your family, that could be your spouse, that could be your friends, that could be colleagues, or it could be a network that you intentionally develop on your own. That's the best way to ensure that a client can go through, can make audacious moves, is to ensure that they are connected to a network that supports them.
Great. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, of course. And speaking of that network, that's the other piece that I hear pushback both from students and clients often, where they say, I don't have a network. Or, right, I'm sure you've heard that many times. So like
Sure,
you said,
sure.
intentionally creating that network. So what does that look like for us as career practitioners supporting that intentional creation of network, especially too with mid-career professionals in addition to those who are students, where the networking might feel a little more natural when you're a student?
Yeah. Well, immersive experiences do generate the network organically and more naturally. The best mentors are the ones um, that are developed organically. That I still have to see one of those sort of like matchmaking mentoring programs work at scale, at least, that really generate these mentoring relationships. When you think of the mentors you have, they're probably people who you've engaged with not for a mentoring purpose, but then it just evolved into that. So that's what I tell people is, so start first by engaging in some immersive experiences. So okay, so let's talk about immersive experiences. Yes, it can be the internship or the job or the research project, but it could also be just your workplace where you work. It could, so I'll tell you one example. I worked with a student once who got a job offer at it was a startup that couldn't pay him a lot of money, and he came back and asked him how he should negotiate that salary. Young kid, and who has loans and who has all of, like the whole issues. And I encouraged him. I said, look, if even if you have to go Uber on the side to make up for the difference, go back to the company and ask them, because he's tried once and they couldn't go up on the salary. I said, ask them if they would substitute the salary increase with a regular mentoring meeting with the founder of the company. I said, like, just and write it in, like, that is what you're going to have. And he thought of it, and I said, like, just ask them if they would do that. That's, I think, what you should do. And then go make up the difference Ubering. And you're young, you can still do this at this point. But this will pay off for you down the road. And he did, and they agreed. They actually were impressed that he asked that, but they agreed to do that. And so now you have a weekly or every other week standing meeting with the founder of the company, who will get to know you, you will get to know them, who will eventually mentor you. So develop these relationships organically. So as you engage in these experiences, find the people that you want to connect with, and then nurture those relationships. And then over time, they evolve into mentoring relationships. But also look in your contact book and see who you already have who you have relationships with, who can serve on that personal advisory board of yours. And that can be a parent. There is no reason why they can't be. That can be a neighbor or an uncle or an aunt or a professor or a teacher. I mean, for students who are who are in colleges, there is no reason why they should graduate without at least one professor or faculty member who cannot be their mentor. All they have to do is just show up to a lot of their office hours on a regular basis, and then they can develop that.
Absolutely. I know there's so many opportunities for students to make those connections and have those experiences. And it's challenging when you're working with private clients who feel like, oh, I no longer have any of that, right? Like they'll often say, I had that once, but I no longer have that. And I know that's not the population you currently work with, but it sounds like you feel that that's applicable, that all of this thinking is applicable at every point in the lifespan.
You know, Rebecca, I do. And I think that I actually worry very much about people looking at life design or these concepts and thinking, well, that's just for the Johns Hopkins kids or the Stanford kids, and not for my community college or for my more adult clientele. I worry about it because I think that kind of thinking might just be robbing those populations of the very technique that could actually make a difference in their lives. I think these concepts are absolutely applicable for the flight attendant who just got laid off at American Airlines just a few weeks ago as a result of COVID-19. They flew around the world for 18 years. They now landed in their final flight, and they had said, now what? I know what skills I have. I know what I've loved to do. Now what do I do? So here's the deal. So right now in COVID-19 is an ideal time for all of us to do some life design thinking. All it is just 5 stages. The first one is, what are you curious about? Deeply empathize with that. Empathize meaning start to ask questions about it. So if you're curious about art, start to ask about art, but also about why you are curious about it. Maybe you start by having conversations with your own family and your parents, if there is the relationship is there, and just say, was I really artistic when I was a kid? Where did that come from? Deeply empathize with that, and then empathize with the art community. What happens to artists out there? What happens to people who consume art? Read about it, watch movies. That is what empathy means, is that you go on a personal research journey around the topic of your curiosity and ask lots of questions. I almost call it like an empathy tour, a listening tour, like and they can take a month, it could take 3 months, but you are just absolutely religiously working on it to try to figure out, what is my subject of curiosity about in relation to the world of work, to industry, to my friends, to my community, the backdrop, just paint the full picture. Once you read, you understand, you have a full understanding. That's what you're trying to achieve from empathy, is full understanding of your subject of your curiosity. You just say, I gotta define what this is, and I gotta maybe see if I can get inspired by it. So, you know, then you define what the challenges are, what the opportunities are. So if we're going with art, here are the economic challenges, and here are the opportunities. Here are what could be. Here are examples of people who made it. Here are examples of people who absolutely failed at this. And you start to make the, you know, to define the whole thing. And again, it's by asking questions, by having conversations with people. So life design is definitely a communal activity. You're constantly in conversation with people about your subject. So you're meeting with people anyways. All you have to do is just ask them, what do you think of this? And those are, you know, your friends or your colleagues, etc. And then you generate a bunch of ideas. I'm sure you don't need me to add to ask you to generate ideas. You're thinking about them anyways. So just jot them down on post-it notes before you go to bed, after you go to bed, put them down, and then you'll notice the idea that just keeps coming back and that never leaves your mind. It's probably the idea that you've been thinking about for the last 5 years or 10 years. In life design, there's this exercise called the Odyssey plan. And the Odyssey plan is basically where you're mapping out your 3 lives, the life your trajectory you're already on, you know, like if you just stay the course and do nothing different, what you will end up doing. The life number 2 is the left trajectory, where if you just stay the course, you do nothing different, but then there's a curveball thrown at you, like you get laid off from your flight attendant job. Now, what do you do? And then basically try to imagine what the future of that is. And then life number 3 is you throw everything out, you make your most audacious move, and you go after the thing that has been nagging you for the last 10 years. That thing in the back of your mind is like, if I could go back in time, I would do that. We all have it. We all have it. Well, okay, write it down, map it out, and then look at it. And then the idea then is like, what would it take to make that audacious move? How tall of an order it is? And I fully recognize that for some people it's hard. You know, when you already have children and a mortgage and responsibilities and health issues, etc., then it's I was like, yeah, maybe it's not this year that I get to write that book. Or maybe it is, because all you have to do is ask the right people the right question. You know, and the right people is, you know, I have all these challenges. Can I still write my book? I'm a flight attendant and I want to write a book. You know, can I still do it? And if all you have to do is just talk to the right person who will tell you, yeah, you can. You have plenty of stories. You have 18 years of worth of stories that you can turn into a book. Let me connect you with an editor. And that's where it starts. This is where, like, if I am a private practice counselor, that's where I start to make a difference. It's not just provide encouragement, it's to say, I think I know someone, or let's brainstorm a list of people who you need to connect with. You should talk to an editor. Let's try to find one. And that connection can start to open the door towards that audacious move. It turns it into a prototype, and then boom, that flight attendant is an author. A couple of years later, you know, and then I don't know, doing speeches like this at conferences, and living a completely different life. I understand that I am oversimplifying it and I make it sound way too easy. But the idea is that it's allowing people to dream and to say it's possible, and let's figure out how to do it. And it's exactly those people who come from underprivileged backgrounds and are in underprivileged situations that deserve life design and that should have life design, and we should bring it to them. I don't want to buy into the narrative that this is only for rich people.
I agree with you 100%. And thank you for walking us through so clearly the empathize, define, ideate, which brings us to prototype, which I had questions around, because in my experience working with clients, prototype is the thing that makes the biggest difference for them in figuring out clarity around where they're going to go next, and also creating some connections through their prototyping. But I've had people, including yesterday, I was running a webinar for people who have been laid off, and the person wrote in the chat and said, you know, I'm a single mom, 2 kids. I just need to put food on the table. I do not have time to prototype. So can you talk to us about, like, what does prototyping entail? How do we fit prototyping into our life, especially as we may be going, someone's going through job searching or holding down some kind of job to keep some income?
I think of so prototyping is trying it out. So I'm gonna use the corny analogy of food just because I'm a foodie and I love trying out new types of and new meals. Um, if you have been considering a new recipe, the best way to, and you've been thinking about it, the only way to know if it works or not is to prototype it. So try it out. Well, so what do you do to make that prototype? You go to the grocery store, you get all the ingredients you think you have after you've done all of your research, etc. And then you go to the kitchen and you put all of that. I mean, there's just so many parallels between culinary arts and the art of creating a new meal and a new recipe and composing our own lives, designing our own lives. You try that, you prototype it. Then when it's finished, you're even you still have a level of bias. You're still not sure if it's good and if you don't know what the reaction is. So you're probably going to have some people who will taste it. And usually it's people you feel safe around, like who will tell you the truth and who will not offend you and who will be okay even if it's horrible. That'll be fine. And you try that out, and and you taste it. So I see the prototype as just as that. I mean, so I give the example with the food. I can give you the example with writing a book, composing a song. If like this is starting a company or a business, you want to prototype it first. I mean that any entrepreneur will tell you that you want to start with that. Basically, that's what they call proof of concept. Prototyping is developing a proof of concept. Does it really work? Is there value for this in the market? So you create something and then you go try it out on people and then just ask them how much would you pay for it, and then that's how that's your business idea. Prototyping can also take shape in the form of taking a class. It could be just as easy as that. Is like, I'm gonna prototype this, I'm gonna go take a class and try to learn from it. So it's not always just creation of something new. It can be just being involved in the in the act of acquiring knowledge and or a new skill. My good friend Dave Evans, who co-authored the book Designing Your Life, says it all the time. It's try stuff out and talk to people. That's all life design is. Try stuff out and talk to people. What I put behind it is that it's easier for some than for others to do that. And I fully recognize that. And we can try to make it possible for all to try stuff out and talk to people.
Great. Yeah. And so I would like to turn to some of the Q&A, which actually gets to some of those questions of like, it's easier for some people than others. And I welcome more questions in the Q&A if you have them. So two individuals have both asked questions around something that we've been talking about, how privilege plays into this. BJ Roach said, particularly first generation students, low SES, and students who have imposter syndrome may particularly struggle around design thinking. And Hoining Na says that, how have you seen underrepresented student populations, first gen, low income, respond? She feels like there's many members of those populations that tend to prefer pathways and feel anxious about uncertainty and flexibility, and there's pushback around that.
I worry actually that might be the narrative that we have rather than that the student themselves have. And let me tell you why. I think if we sit down with the students themselves, well, let me just say, like my experience personally with first generation, limited income, underrepresented minorities, people of color going through this, is that once they go through the full curriculum or the concept or even just the conversation, their stress level goes down, their anxiety level goes down, because now you're shifting the narrative around expectations. With clear career pathing, career planning, the expectation is that they get a job, and that is always going to be stressful. The expectation around life design is that you are charting a new territory for you. This is much more exciting proposition, daunting certainly, and they're scared. There's all those feelings don't go away, but it's a much more exciting proposition versus will I get a job? Will somebody want me? Versus will I be able to chart my own future? So this is one. Two is recognizing that there are challenges in the backdrop there, that fly student might be already dealing with the responsibility of sending money home to help with their family. So they're in the process of trying to figure out their own life design, but also how to help out their family. And they're trying to think of practicality versus audacious moves. I absolutely get that. But I think we can walk them through it. We can get them there and we can have them negotiate those two things, even to a point where even if they end up making the decision of going the route of less audacious and more practical for the sake of family, now they know what they're doing. Like they have made the conscious decision that this is what they're going to do, and perhaps and this is meaningful now, and this is their life design because they're prioritizing this. So that whole conversation is life design too, that taking the um, I don't want to say the easy job, but just taking the more linear path, if you will, taking that job that pays the bills, even though it doesn't completely align with their passion and it's not what they thought that they would be doing, or that they're not giving themselves the opportunity to truly design their lives, but they're doing it for a purpose. That's a life path that they're designing for themselves for now. And the idea is, how do you not allow that um, um, that seed to to fade away, like that fire, that flame in them, like if they've recognized the area of curiosity and inspiration, how do you keep it alive while you're doing that? And you can work with them on strategies with this. But the students I work with, I will tell you, I mean, and they come from very underprivileged backgrounds. I wouldn't be fooled by just the brand of the institution where I work. When that we're actually now we've reached 60% underrepresented minority versus 40% students of privilege. So we're really trying to. So I know the students we work with and the backgrounds that they come from, and they come from very challenging stories and backgrounds. This works for them too, and the biggest impact that I have found is that it relieves stress. It just changes the conversation around expectations and around outcomes and around goals, and it's a much more productive conversation. While I'm saying this, let me also answer one of the questions. This one is from Meg Jerry, who asked about the influence of chaos theory and happenstance. Absolutely. I mean, before life design, there was John Crumboltz and happenstance and chaos theory, and that's, I think, when we started to move from the career development theories of the past into the career development theories that are more about embracing uncertainty and pursuing curiosity and taking risks. I mean, all of the themes in Crumbolt's book "Luck is No Accidents" are all in life design today. It's the same thing under a different wrap. When I was at Stanford, I used to have breakfast with John Crumboltz, the late John Crumboltz, before he passed away, and we'd have these long conversations, and always looked forward to them and learned a ton from him. So not only been influenced, I've been just printed, I think, by Crumboltz, and very, very much appreciated. And I think Andrew Yang is probably the first person, that's the political candidate, the first person who's been able to make the conversation about the move towards automation and the shifts in the economy more mainstream than it's ever been. I mean, it's a conversation that has always been in magazines and in newspapers and on some TV news channels, but he was able to, I think, turn it into a national campaign that allowed a lot of people to really absorb it and understand what it means for an economy that will be much more driven by machines than by humans, and what that means for human labor. So he's had a huge impact, I think, in his recent candidacy for president, and hopefully that conversation will continue because we're going to see the impact. Thanks for that question, Meg.
Yeah, and on a related note, Helen Gorgas writes about another existing technique, motivational interviewing, where you ask students or clients where they struggle, offer the hearing of the dream, and then ask if you heard the dream correctly and take next steps. If they want to figure out what next steps they need to take to get there. Do you feel like motivational interviewing is related to design thinking?
So I think it can be, at least the way it is described here, it can be. I mean, I think what the, the the most important part of design thinking or of life design is the action part. Is that at some point you start to move from ideation to prototyping. You gotta put it together. So once you pick an idea and run with it. If it's starting a business, then start a business. If it's write a book, write a book. Um, and you get it started by building a prototype. So I think it relates in that sense, is that it encourages them to go from dream to, okay, what's the next step? What is the action you're going to take beyond researching? I like to move my own clients and students. I like to move them fairly quickly into action. I personally don't want them to continue to just dwell on reflection too long. I mean, I think I want them to reflect just enough to understand and to empathize and to generate those ideas. Um, but we generate momentum by moving to prototype fairly quickly, and it gets you there either way. Like, it gets you to a place where you either realize you're headed in the wrong direction, or you're headed in the right direction. And if it's the wrong direction, then it's a process of elimination. Then we go back and we re-empathize one more time.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, yes, when prototyping occurs, things happen. Things start to move for individuals in a massive way. I think many of us are great at reflecting. We can spend years thinking about something, but not doing anything about it, which is a really important point. And to that, Jim Peacock mentions that he really likes to try something out and talk to people, and you need to help the person, it seems to him, determine their skills or strengths first. How do skills factor into your thinking around design thinking?
Well, we're entering the era of reskilling now. You saw the stats that I shared earlier from the World Economic Forum, that 50% of workers are going to have to reskill by 2025, and 40% of workers that did not share this stat will be involved in reskilling that involves just 1 to 6 months. So it's not, having to go and pursue another college degree. It's really literally a class or two or something online, or sometimes you learn best by trying, by just getting your hands and on it, and being involved in it. So I th- uh, so skills is really important, and I want to say that prototyping actually is a great skill building activity. Because as you're prototyping, you're out. I mean, the prototypes that I've been engaged with at the beginning, I was like, I have no idea what I am doing. I have no clue what I'm doing, but it's okay. I'm gonna try to figure this out. For those of us who use social media, think about it that way. Is like the first day when you turned on that Twitter account or whatever it is, you didn't know what you were doing, but you did it anyways. So you just lurked for a few weeks, right? Or maybe a few months, maybe some of you a few years, I don't know. So you just lurk by doing nothing, and you're just watching the scene, and then eventually you're like, oh, apparently I can like things, or I can comment on things, and you do that, and so you see what happens, and you're constantly prototyping, you're trying things out, and you're just pushing the edges, and then eventually you get comfortable and you get good at it and you get better at it. So I'm using a very simplistic example here to say that is the same thing with skills of the future. So for example, many of us here are going to have to become content creators. So content creators, meaning that we're going to have to get good at blogging, at social media, at drafting websites in a different way, at turning our workshops and all of our knowledge and the things that we use to counsel people into documents, into books, into things like that. That is a tall order. How do we do it? Is by developing that skill through prototyping. And maybe at first I want to go and take a writing class. Maybe I'll start there to try to get better at it. Maybe I hire a coach who can help me out. Do you know that several years ago, I remember just as I started getting invitations to more invitations to go do the public speaking, I wasn't really comfortable with public speaking because I'm an introvert, right? I'm an INFP, and I'm thinking I don't really want to do that. So I went and hired actually a communication coach who would help me out, and we worked on skills. This was a long time ago, but we worked on some skills to try to get me more comfortable and get better at it. So it's the idea is once you identify your area of curiosity, your prototype, what you want to try, then how you get those skills is really, really easy, especially these days with LinkedIn Learning, Coursera, online platforms all over that helps us have access to new knowledge and new skills really quickly. And most of the time, we don't need the certification. We just need the skills. We just need to get good at it.
Absolutely. That skill building is so key. And another thing that was really helpful in your talk was where you had those 10 COVID-19 early trends. And Mary Ellen Bell is in particular interested in the early trend about building and reinventing community. And she'd love to know more about that.
So I am watching and I'm experiencing this COVID-19 pandemic era just as all of you are. I have 3 children who are doing online schooling at home, and I'm working virtually all the time also. I am craving community. I'm sure you are too. And my kids are too. One of my children is a kindergartner. This is the first, there's a whole generation of kindergartners around the United States, possibly around the world, that is starting school this way, completely online. And it's amazing because at her young age, she knows what to do early in the morning. At 8 o'clock, she goes and turns on Zoom. She knows how to mute, how to turn on and off, how to do the chat box, how to speak, when to do all of these things. She's picked up those skills really quickly. But during breaks and after Zoom school, as she calls it, she keeps asking, when is coronavirus over, and when do I go to actual school? People, we are tribal creatures. We want to be around people. So what I meant by that in my conversation or in my in my slide is that there is deep craving for it. No one has figured out how to do it. There are several attempts here and there. There are all these apps coming up that now we're all using and trying out in our classes. And but no one has figured out how to make it happen. Probably so the onus on us is to try to figure out how to do this safely and online. Obviously, the alternative is that the virus goes away and then we go back to hanging out at coffee shops and restaurants and workroom break rooms, and connecting with being in community with one another. We need community. There's no question. And Zoom is 2-dimensional right now to make it happen. I will tell you that the closest thing that I have seen to it, but I don't think is there, that I have a 14-year-old who plays Minecraft with his peers, and he's in a Minecraft club that was set up by the school. And he is the only one who refers to the people who he's with on Minecraft as friends, even though he hasn't met them yet, but he calls them friends. Apparently there is a community already created there. It's not just video game, they're actually building stuff. There are colleges that are using Minecraft now to teach leadership and to teach all sorts of concepts. So I think that there is potential in the gaming industry to come up with a tool or a platform to help with that.
I can't wait to see what happens around all that community. I too have a 5-year-old who was supposed to be in kindergarten this year, but thankfully summer birthday, I said, you get 1 more year before you start to dig in, but we may not have it all locked in by next fall. So we'll see how it goes. But one thing that really is shifting, as you noted, is this applicants, job applicants really being more job prospectors. And so Jill Barlow Kelly said, how might or how are employers reacting to an emphasis from being job applicants to being job prospectors?
So it's interesting because I think employers are trying to figure this out too. You know, like we're constantly focused on the candidate and how they're looking at their future, but employers are trying to also figure this out. So what we know is that the employer not only wants to hire the right talent, but they want to hire the right talent that wants them, that wants that job, and that really will do, will be passionate about it. Those are the type of people we all want to hire too. He's not just the person who can do the job, he's the person who really wants to do the job. So it's to their benefit that a prospector is interested in is going through their own life design journey to try to make sure that they are truly interested in that role. But I think it's getting harder also for employers, especially during these COVID-19 times, because now everything is virtual. And how do you assess for that? How do you assess for interest? For, right now they're assessing mostly on skill and on what they call fit, which is a word that I don't really like for lack of inclusivity. But that, they're looking for fit, they're looking for skill, but they're not necessarily they don't truly assess for does this align with your life design journey of your passion, of what you're really interested in. But I think hopefully that they'll get there. And it is hard because now they do it mostly online. So there's a lot of virtual interviewing that's happening. So from an employer perspective, I would say that they're still figuring it out. And the second thing that I will say is that employers are human too, and they have their own life design journey. They're trying to figure out what they want to do as well. So there is an opportunity to sell this message to them from, so if I'm a career center at a university, there's an opportunity to sell this narrative to them also and have them participate in it.
Absolutely. And I see we only have about 5 minutes left in our fireside chat. It's just flying by. So I think I'm going to try to combine a couple of the questions. Rick Wilson was asking about whether there's any life design programs in the younger years. And I see this as related and administrative. It's like, as all of this is shifting, everyone needs to shift, right? We need to get younger education around life design. And at the same time, we have to get the administrators at all levels on board with this type of thinking. So the question also came up about, like, parents and administrators and review committees are still asking about placement data when you look at the college level. So how do we change the systems around education to support design thinking?
So two really good questions. I'm already seeing design thinking, not life design, but design thinking all over K through 12. I mean, it's all over. I'm seeing it, in my kids' schools, it's coming up, and on its own, it's finding its way there. So I know that education as an industry is very interested in design thinking as an approach. I think they're using it not necessarily for life design, but for project design, for teaching entrepreneurship, for teaching creativity, for all of these things, and they're actually teaching them the concept. So I think it's only a matter of time before schools will start to apply that in the career guidance, if you will, and the life design. So I would love to start seeing college counselors, for example. High school counselors who are helping students choose colleges to use life design as a way to think about their future. So that could come next. The second part of this question is really, really good and really interesting. That's about how do you is about expectations, right, with parents and with a narrative. And I will tell you, I don't know how it is for you, but working at so my last two institutions at Stanford and at Johns Hopkins, as you might imagine, those expectations from those parents are really high because because of everything that goes with the brand of the institution, the how much it costs and what they think it should be, so well, of course, if they're coming to this school, then they're going to have this job making this kind of money. So the expectations for placement data and is really high. So I had to work really hard early on at Johns Hopkins to shift the narrative. And I knew that I needed to change the narrative fairly quickly within my first 6 months, so that I don't talk about this as much anymore. And actually, I did the same thing when I was at Stanford. Is that early on I had to shift. So at Stanford, I shifted the narrative from jobs to meaningful work. And the conversation became about how do students find meaningful work. And the way I sell it to parents is I talk about parents themselves and their own journey to meaningful work and what it's like. And then all of a sudden the conversation shifts towards that. I did the same thing at Johns Hopkins when I came in and I started talking about inspiration and audacious moves and how, and the idea of how career planning doesn't work. And I usually ask the crowd of, several hundreds of parents, how many of you are living out your plans from when you were 18? And, very few hands usually are up. So you can get parents on board if you can get them to connect and to empathize and to relate to what you're talking about. If we stop talking with them with infographics and we start talking to them as human beings who have had to navigate their own career development, use them as examples, and then just say, here's what we think will work for your kids, and here's how you can help us out. I have found this to be very effective. It has worked for me twice now in a row at colleges that are where it's not easy to shift that narrative, and I think it's working out. So in both campuses now, I rarely got the question about placement stats in at Stanford, and now people are starting to not ask about it anymore.
I would agree too. That's been my experience at Bates too, that
Yeah.
people are pretty open to new ways of thinking if you see their fears, right, and address those as well as you're doing the process.
Yeah, and I think sometimes because we forget that parents are human beings, and I'm guilty of that. We just kind of like see them as these clients who are overly stressed out and at any moment they'll just blow a fuse and start complaining about something. So I'll give you a quick example. I know we're about to be out of time, or we're already out of time. So we had proposed doing a life design session for all parents and families during family weekend. And as you could tell, like, there were a lot of stressed out people about that idea internally, from development to all of them who are like, oh, I don't know, the parents are not going to like this. They're going to write to the president, this and that. And I'm just thinking, like, just watch people, like, these parents are going to eat this up. So anyways, we pushed it and we made it happen. It was a big room. We had a couple of our life design educators on the team who did the 1 hour session. And the stress here is like, are they going to really get the silly games and ideas and like the Odyssey activity and this activity? We're making them do things that might feel like a little bit, I don't know, high schools, or kindergarten. We're having them play. And we did it anyways, and we owned it. It was their favorite session of the entire family weekend. They loved it. That room was hopping. They came out with high energy. They got it, and we gave them stuff to talk with their kids about at the dinner table, or at whenever if they took them out to dinner that night.
Oh, that's wonderful. And thank you for all of this wonderful information. We didn't get to every Q&A, but we really appreciate everything that all the participants brought to the table. Thank you, Dr. Day. And I'm going to turn it over to Donna, who's going to tell us next steps, because there's still much more to do today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And I wish you the best of luck at Bates and with all of the great courses you're teaching.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you both so much. That was such an interesting conversation. I really wish we had more time. I think we could probably talk for another hour, and there was lots more questions, but maybe you'll have a chance to discuss that a little bit in your breakout groups this afternoon. So for now, we're going to take about a 15-minute break. And as it was explained to you, when you come back at 10:30, we'll be logging on to a new Zoom link, which I'm going to share here on the screen, so that everybody can kind of see each other for the second half or part two, and we'll be able to interact. We'll see you shortly. Take about 15 minutes, come back at 10:30 on this new Zoom link.
Join a team. Once you join a team, we want you to share a happy happenstance moment that changed the trajectory of your life really quickly, because we only have an hour and a half. So do it really quickly. Pick a name for your team. So this is your opportunity to be creative. So after you share your moments, the idea is that you now know each other a little bit more, and you can come up with just one quick name for your team. The best names for teams or organizations are usually one word, 2 syllables. So that's just a tip, kind of like Google, Facebook, Twitter, So there's a reason why all the startups have one word names. So that's just a tip, but you can call yourself whatever you want. Choose a scribe and or a prototype presenter, meaning that it could be the same person who is a note taker and who's also your prototype presenter at the end, or they can be 2 people, and then get to work. There are 2 cases here. The first one is, so some of you will be working on the case about designing a mentoring prototype for your students. And the idea here is that mentoring is helpful, but it's not accessible to everyone. How can you make it accessible to everyone? So if you're in your team and you have this case study, you're gonna walk through the entire design thinking process to build a prototype for mentoring. The second one is help a client pivot and design a new life after being laid off. So I'm going to give you quickly just the both of these cases. In case 1, we know that mentoring is too consequential and important to miss, yet too many students and people do not have mentors. And you will have this document, by the way, in your group, so no need to take notes. Your goal as an educator or hired consultant is to create a new mentoring initiative that ensures that all students in your institution have meaningful mentoring relationships. Use design thinking principles to establish this new program. So I have here prompts for each one of those. That's the thing, like you don't have, just follow the guide. You don't have to do a lot. Just follow the guide, answer the questions, and have conversations. The questions are for guiding purposes. So the questions are here to guide you. Please don't get stuck in making sure that you're answering every single question. Just use the questions to guide you. But the most important thing is that you're going through the motions and you're sticking with a timeline. You don't want us to be stuck in empathize an hour later. And if I could ask the scribe to also be the timekeeper, that would be great. So try to stick with, it's hard to do empathy in 15 minutes, but we'll try to do, we'll try it out. And the idea with empathize here is that I'm having you mimic the process of empathy if you were doing it in other places. So for mentoring, we want you to just talk about stories of transformational mentoring you've experienced or observed. That's one way to get closer to empathy. What feelings and emotions stand out? How would you visualize them? What were the challenges and opportunities? So you start to get closer to it. If this was in real life, I would send you out to the field to do the study and ask lots of people, do the market research in order to empathize. And then move to define. We know that mentoring is too hard to scale at universities and institutions. So answer these questions, and then you can answer other questions. Again, they're guides. So don't get too stuck in the questions themselves. Just basically try to define overall what the challenges and opportunities are. What are the missed opportunities that are out there to create equitable access to mentoring? What infrastructure already exists? Who are the key players? And then move quickly to ideate. You have 20 minutes to come up with as many ideas as possible. At first, you're going to come up with ideas on your own. So take like 5 minutes in silence and jot down as many ideas as possible on paper or on your computer or post-it notes if you have them, and then share them with one another and start to thematize, create themes. Maybe the scribes start to figure out like, okay, I'm hearing the theme about this or about that, and then start to jot them down, come up with your top 3 themes, and then at the end of the 20 minutes, come up with your one idea that you're going to prototype. As a group, just say, we want to prototype this. And then you move to prototyping. You have 30 minutes to create the full prototype. So here it's just one set of instruction, which is build a prototype. So type it up, draw it, you know, do a PowerPoint, however you want to present it. So basically start to develop it based on the conversations you've had. And that's it. So at the end of these 30 minutes, you're going to come back to this large group and you're going to do the testing part with us. So each group will have their prototype presenter present their prototype in just a matter of a minute or two. And I'm, you know, really quickly. And this is kind of like our attempt to having everybody taste our cake that we just baked and try to get some feedback. And then I'm gonna ask everybody else to type their comments in the chat box about these questions. What makes sense, what needs rework or further development, who are the champions needed, what are the opportunities, how do we turn this idea into reality? This is kind of, and you know, and I'm having you do it in the chat box rather than speaking for the sake of time. And so that's basically case number one. I'm gonna give you case number two. This one is an interesting one. Pixel has worked as a flight attendant at United Airlines for 18 years and was recently laid off due to the impact of COVID-19. Pixel recently contacted you to seek your help, was referred to you. Pixel became a flight attendant for the love of travel, adventure, meeting new people, and thrill of dealing with emergencies. Pixel has lost all hope and is unsure of the 18 years of how the 18 years of skills can translate into another meaningful career. Pixel's own a home and has a mortgage, is in a relationship, and has a 15-year-old child at home and a cat. Use design thinking principles to help Pixel reach acceptance, reframe the current situation, and design a new prototype. Same concept as earlier, so I'm going to zip through these. Empathize as a group with what Pixel is going through. You have a series of questions here. Define what the challenges and the opportunities. You have a question here also, 15 minutes to do this. And then come up with as many ideas, like pretend as a group you're sitting with Pixel, come up with as many ideas as possible of how can Pixel take everything that has happened in the last 18 years and start to develop a new path forward. And then start to build a prototype for whatever you think Pixel should do, or what Pixel should do in the next journey. And then at the end of these 30 minutes, come back as a group, and we're going to have you present through your presenter in just 1 or 2 minutes, and have everybody comment in the chat box to these questions. Got it. And you have this exact slide in as a link. So when you go to your group, just click on that. And that's about it. So this is these are the instructions really quickly. Make sense?